Welcome back to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your host, Vanessa Baldwin, with my amazing co-host, Heather Crimson. And today we have a guest. This is a friend actually of mine right from my local area, which is amazing to know somebody else who actually embodies this quantum biology lifestyle practices and principles and does all this. We have Robyn Gaillard with her. She is the founder of the Mind-Body Connection Wellness, where she teaches others how to harness your wellness and oneness through the lens of nervous system, circadian health, and cellular health. And we are thrilled to have you here, Robyn. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Oh, thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Heather. It's great to be here with both of you.
Yes,
And
so
thanks for that intro.
this was amazing. So tell us, Robyn, about just what are the highlights of how you got here? You know, you as a healer, what do you do? How do you define yourself in this healing realm?
Oh, excellent question. Well, a student and a teacher. And I think the best teachers are students as well. So always learning, ever expanding. And all of my work was born from personal experience. So it's also been like just an exercise in acceptance and forgiveness and gentleness with myself and my set of circumstances, but then also through that, how empowered I've become in really understanding what transformation and alchemy truly is and how to support other people in that process. And of course, there's, my personal reasons why, which I'm happy to talk about if you're interested.
Yeah, we're interested. Tell us, because I know that you've done like a lot of layering of learning more and more modalities like through your life and layering all that together to make really this beautiful, symphony of modalities that can help a person on their healing journey. So yeah, tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I think, a convergence of so many things around, I'd say like 2016, which was like shortly after my son was born. And I think there were, decades of stuff leading up to this apex, but in this apex of time, being a new mom and having the hormonal cascade that comes along with that. Oh my gosh. And a lot of life stressors, and unpredictable and not the greatest or sustainable personal situation. And so because of that, I spent a lot of time making choices that were kind of sabotaging who I was in order to save a sinking ship. And then but in the midst of all of that, I suddenly had skin cancer. I suddenly had thyroid disease. Never been sick and like just a healthy person and all of these things. Go ahead. What
So
were we?
a lot of emotional turmoil in your life, and all of a sudden you started wrapping up some diagnoses. Is that correct?
You said it. Yeah. And also just so numb to everything because, when you're out at sea and you're just trying to tread water to keep your head above, you can't think, you can't see like in the distance, you can't think long range. You're so right here, right now, but not present in an embodied way, in an out of body way. And so there was just an accumulation of things that I also lost a lot of weight and had like just a couple of interesting things where um, I was with girlfriends from childhood at the beach, for example, and we all went into the water and they all gasped at me. They all collectively went, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, you're so skinny. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I just was, and so that was like a moment of reflection of like, okay. And then not long after that, or maybe shortly before that, those two things kind of happened at the same time. My son kicked me in the neck and I got a stiff neck. It was like one of those like
Mm.
kind of divine moments, I think. So I go to the doctor because I'm like, my neck, and he's like, you don't weigh enough. There's something going on with your health. You need to go, get blood work done. And I thought, oh, okay. I guess I'm really skinny. Like I didn't think about it. And then that's when I found out I had the thyroid situation. And they wanted to take it out. They wanted to do radiation. And I had like a snapped back into it moment. I was like, I've been a yoga teacher for years. I'm a healthy person. This is a not okay phase of life. I'm going to get through it. Something just like came through me. And I worked to start to heal through that. So I did not do any medical intervention. And I started to ask why I got the skin cancer. And I started to just really, I was just taking walks. And, at this point, like, I guess we're coming up on COVID, life was like kind of swirling anyway. Just diligently went through my day to day, was making sure the kids were okay, making sure I was okay and getting through each day, but started to really carve out time for myself. And in that, I noticed that I was lost. I was just lost. I was emotionally like, my heart hurt. I was crying all the time. I felt like I wasn't even present for the kids, for my life, for anything. But I just somehow had a sage voice inside of me that kept saying little by little, little by little. And I had, a therapist who was super supportive, and I really was able to get the help I needed. And I started to heal, but it was the circadian stuff. It was the heart coherence stuff. It was the way that I was breathing, the way I was going outside, the way I was giving myself more sunshine, the way I was prioritizing sleep at night. It was all of these practices that I started to embody. And I did heal. I healed. I'm fine.
That's
So
beautiful.
It's so
yeah.
interesting how this process of coming back to yourself, it's like coming home to yourself, right? It's like you're reparenting, but in a holistic, divine way. Like now I'm going to tend, not saying you didn't get parented well, I'm just saying, but that's kind of what it's like. Like we have to literally walk ourselves through this process of the utmost care and tenderness and self-attunement so that you can intuit what you need. Because it can't just be what other people are telling us. Like you intuited it in a big way in that moment when the doctor was saying surgery. That's when you tapped into this divine knowing. I just think it's so beautiful, Robyn. Thanks for sharing. Tell us more.
Thank you. I appreciate how you shared that back. That was so, yes, you understand it very clearly. I think I don't know what it was, but I listened, and I'm ever grateful for that. And I think that's when I started to make friends with my intuition and not fear it. And I've started to in my work too, because I'm able to, when I listen to a client, I know exactly where to go. And I've started to just feel more confident in that aspect of my work when as I toggle through like wellness and oneness and what light is in the body and in life and what the absence of light shows up as, and sort of hearing how people are talking to me and what they're really saying, and be able to just tune in and go right there and bring somebody to the other side. And, that's been an aspect of my work that I struggle to talk about because I don't want to like, you don't want to show up like a fraud. So I just feel like, but it is a huge part of how I support people. And I think because I've honed it, it's like so sacred and special to me. Intuition, it's like my best friend, and it's time with God, it's time in prayer, it's time outside, it's time. Somebody I was talking to recently was talking about just the flower just shows up and expresses God, right? The trees just bloom and they express God essence. The sky is just blue, it's expressing the water. The grass, everything just is fully expressed, and you can see it or not, depending upon how finely attuned you are, which changes throughout a day and throughout seasons in life, right? But if we really can harness that power within us, and that's where I work with people to understand heart-brain coherence, and how when we're so overthinking, and a lot of us have escaped what's really hard about our lives, and life can be really hard right now. And by going in the mind and overthinking, and instead of like feeling, it's really hard to feel, by the way, and I want to come back to alchemy because it's really hard to feel, but by when you overthink, you bypass all these opportunities to really bring the emotion that you need to let go forward. And people don't even know. It's like emotion soup. They don't even know what these feelings are. And because it's so hard to handle, we go into these overthinking, these neurodivergent behavior patterns that have become much more apparent in our society, and their coping strategies that we can control things with our thoughts, and then we don't have to feel, so we feel better. So I kind of went through all of that, and then thanks to the wisdom that came through me, my friend intuition, when I finally started making choices that led me to the other side of the challenges from that embodied, grounded state, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is what safety feels like. Oh,
Mm.
so now I can think with this much perspective instead of this much perspective. And, watching how my son came through those difficult times. And I really was like, how did I get here? How did I do this? It's like that constructivist way of learning, where you kind of, you know the answer, and then you practice working your way through the question to the problem, even though you know the end point. And that was my experience in all of this.
Mm.
And so I thought, okay, I think this is my work. And, through so I have the heart math certification, and I love all that work with neuroscience and the understanding of coherence and the physiology of the heart, because I really needed to work with my breath and embody more and more to really feel what safety felt like, and the practice of jumping out and coming back into the body. And, kids still need dinner, still bedtime. There's still like the routine of the day to day, for better or worse, that we would frustrate or activate or support me in this dance. And I think, people go through grief in many different ways. I think divorce is a big grief trigger. I think death is a big grief trigger, and it's really, really hard. I think holding space for people to go through your day to day when you're not okay, and know that the world has the world does not see that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to be authentic and pure and raw, and know that you're going to walk to the mailbox and it might not, like, you might cry doing it, or thank God I got to walk to the mailbox, because that brought me into the present moment in a really grounded, here I am way. And so I think this toggle, I guess I've only been able to describe it as wellness and oneness, right? This toggle between your wellness and your oneness, and the dance that we do kind of in our inner work, in our conscious self, with our subconscious self and our unconscious self throughout our day and our life. And as we go through these really challenging ups and downs, and, that's where I feel like, oh, okay, I think I understand this in myself and in others. And so it's how I've been able to really advocate for the life that I want. And it's not easy, and also the life that I want for my son, and, how we see. And I think, like, when you go through something in life, and then you come to the other side, and you see in color again, your vision sharpens, like, the depth and the beauty of light changes, what you hear, the sound changes, everything. You really notice, like a finely tuned instrument, that it can be, that it's different. And so then you hear discord more easily, and your discernment is honed, and you start to really understand that life is very different when you want to be aligned. So,
Oh my God, so many beautiful things you were just saying. It sounds like, we all have that intuition. We all have that inner knowing, and you always had it. And you were like Heather mentioned before, but it seems like, and I've experienced this too, and I'm sure Heather has as well. The more that you improve your coherence in your body through the heart map, through the circadian biology, all the things that you practices that you're doing, your mindfulness, right? That intuition has just gotten stronger and stronger, right? And it's now building to where you can use it in your practice, and you can use it with clients. So that's a beautiful thing. And I love that you called it your friend, because it is that inner knowing. And we do know what is right for us, and we just have to learn how to tap into that. And having more coherence in our body is going to allow for that to express. That's what I'm hearing.
yeah, 100%. And I think, so I've kind of sectioned my work into 4 categories of, like, movement, thoughts, emotions, and light. And I think understanding, like, circadian health and quantum biology has helped me so much, because, it's the right way of looking at the science of who we are and our expression, right? So if you have this I don't know, like healthy water, healthy cells, then the cells are vibrating in a healthy way, healthy patterns, healthy mitochondria. There's your energy flow. And then you're like, and the way you bring light into your life, that circadian biology, if you're sleeping at night, then you can be awake during the day, and that was one of my, holy cow, like, motherhood will take you there, and it will take you there and give you lessons. And those early days, I was having 24-hour days. I was wearing what I call 24-hour outfits. I was like, it doesn't matter. I just have
Robyn,
to.
I've been there. I think it was more 48 sometimes. So I
Yeah,
like,
just
oh,
like
am I
whatever I
still
could
wearing this?
Yeah,
When
whatever
was
it
the
was
last
like,
time you showered? I
yes,
don't
whatever I could
remember.
go to the bus stop in or cook dinner in or sleep in and then get up and go in because like your night is day and your day is night and it's just everything is so
Yeah.
confused and I wish I'm so happy I learned through that, but that was a huge, I mean, that took me down because being up all night and then tired all day, I mean, it was months and months and too much of that level of stress over a long period of time. And so
Was your skin cancer diagnosis and your thyroid issues after your son was born? I'm just reminding my
yeah,
of the
it was. It was
okay,
in
yeah.
those first couple of years. And it's
Yeah.
so funny that so the skin cancer thing and like my eyes, like all this stuff has come to, it's like, oh my gosh, in the last couple of years, it's like all these realizations. Like I've worn contacts and glasses my whole life. And, the
Mhm.
doctor was like, oh, you grew up in a beach town. That's where you got your skin cancer. I'm like, no. And I,
Mhm.
I was like, no, that's not
Even
true.
then, you knew intuitively knew. Is
I
that before
knew.
you knew circadian biology and like the science of sunlight?
I didn't, but I did, if that makes sense, because I
Yeah.
knew that I was kept out of the sun and I knew that I was always in the shade and I knew that I wore sunblock. So I knew it wasn't the sun because I had to have been the absence of the sun, So I was like, something is, and I think in that time where it kind of came through, it was like, the hormones, I was nursing, there was all that emotional stress and like just turmoil in my day-to-day life. So like I think you said how they're so eloquently like just the emotional stuff expressed as dis-ease, and that was something concrete to start to focus on. So I appreciate it in hindsight, right? Because I could,
Mm.
matter of factly handle it, even though I was like, this is so ugly. Am I know? Like, oh my gosh. But we got through it. But yeah, in the understanding of why I got sick, I asked those deep, deep questions. And so same with the thyroids. I mean, it was all these circadian practices and the tuning into nature and the inside time, the ratio of time inside versus time outside. And this is all stuff I talk to people about and work with people on now. And, I really had to teach myself, even the diet, more seasonal eating, more fats, more meats,
Mhm.
less whatever's on the counter, like all these bad habits I had. But really, and also sitting down and having a meal, like,
Oh yeah.
like not just, like in the, like walking by, picking up toys and eat, like that's not nourishment, all these,
Mhm.
practices of self-care that I had abandoned because I thought efficiency and just like being so over hyper vigilant and overthinking and judgmental of myself because of just circumstances and things getting out of control. I went into hyper fixation mode, so I was not in my body.
Almost like
um
a symptom whisperer is the phrase that comes up because it's like people are so freaked out by their body's symptoms. Oh my
Mm.
God, what is it? I have this, do I have a disease and blah, blah, blah. And then so we are in a fear state, which just exacerbates or compromises the body's ability to heal itself. And so it's like the idea, the thought I had coming up when I'm listening to you, Robyn, is that, y- you know, it would be amazing if we had this whole paradigm shift, which is what you're basically presenting to us, if the symptom allowed us to feel safer because it's showing us the way of
Mhm.
what is not working in our life, lifestyle, our inner world, our outer world, what things we need to do or to find, right, to be able to pivot and do go on a new path of being attuned to our bodies, of listening, of befriending nature, our own nature, external nature, how we see ourselves separate from nature. But that's what I see you talking about is that instead of what we've been conditioned with all this fear and oh my God, and da, 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 you have been able to basically illustrate this beautiful example of, well, actually, right, I do know. And actually, these symptoms are showing me the way that I need to go, right? So,
yeah, that's beautiful. It is so, the world doesn't hold your hand through that, unfortunately. So yeah, like, like we were joking about, befriending my intuition led me through that because they were showing me the way. And I think you always get a choice point too, like, stay in the medical model or try something else. Come back. I was diligent with the blood work. I kept coming back. I remember talking to the endocrinologist. She was wonderful. And she, it was so interesting. She was I think that she immigrated to America from India. And so I was like, well, didn't you study Ayurveda? She said, yes. And I said, well, what?
Mm.
And it's funny because like, I don't mean to sound like curt in my questioning to people, but sometimes it's like an innocent, like, oh, well, why did you study Western medicine? Why would you? I know I said that. And she was like,
No,
well,
it's good. I love that you said that.
That's great.
but she was wonderful. She didn't press me or anything. And I just said, I will do this routine blood work. But I said, you didn't ask me how I got here. And I said, in talking to you, I've realized how I got here. And now I need to go home and like handle it. And then I'll come back and do the blood and we'll go from there. And that's really what I said to this doctor. And I remember having this moment when I went into remission. That word keeps you in the model.
Mm.
um, and I was like, I wanted to like skip into the office and say like, we all can heal ourselves. And it was like this, I feel like that's where sometimes like I have to laugh at myself because you walk in and everybody's heads are down and like the smell is different than outside. And like, there's like, the signal to noise ratio is a little off in these medical centers and there's a lot of beeping and you just have to constantly sign in and then wait to be called in. And there's always some kind of pharmaceutical
Yeah.
write-up that goes along with it. And I remember walking in and I was like, oh, I'm not like nobody wants to hear this here. I'm not a match to this world. But, again, I'm grateful that I had this framework to guide me through, right? Like you said with the symptoms, how they're like these concrete steps that were pivot points for me or opportunities for me to stay in the medical system or choose something different. And those were little stepping stones for me and they got me through because we do need really concrete step-by-step things in our life. We can't live in the sky. We are earthlings. We have to be on planet Earth. We need to be grounded. So, that was, I'm grateful for that. And I think back to what you said about my symptoms, they were way showers for me.
Yeah.
And, I'm, pretty good with my health these days. I'm healthy. And I know if I'm going to catch something, I know if I'm not quite right. I know if I've got something going on in digestion, like my friend intuition. Well, and then I've got all my little supports and usually I just, go sit in the sun, try to get a few nights of sleep, and I notice shifts immediately. So, I can really fall back on circadian wisdom and quantum biology and like this quantum lens to guide me through.
I'm
Um,
curious, how did you get into how did you get into circadian and quantum? Like, how did that come up? Is there like a story behind that?
that's a great question. I think I've just followed the whispers.
Mm, okay,
Um,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
something saw
I,
it somewhere.
yeah, no, I think, I mean, I definitely saw Meredith Oaks speak. I saw something come up about the Quantum Biology Collective, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was like, "Oh, this makes perfect sense." It was like this way of it was like this vocabulary that like helped me understand my understanding. So I was able to just like jump in and yeah, and that's where I never, I do my best with social media. I really don't use it, but with Instagram, I feel so grateful that like the algorithm shows me like people like you and, like this kind of thing. Like, okay, like I got to keep following these people, these stories, the way that people are bringing themselves and this work forward because it is what I do. I don't know that I feel the need to like proclaim it publicly like that, but I have been able to really work locally and find my way. And so I feel like from that standpoint, I'm like, well, as long as I'm true to myself, because really we're bringing a story of ourself through, it's like our authentic self-expression. And through that, I can like harness my work and then support others. So yeah, that's a great question, Vanessa. And I feel like it just all in the last few years, things have just kind of converged, I think, in my favor.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it just happens like that. Like it's just like, oh, it's just I saw something and I got interested and that was it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
was, that was that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
oh,
Before,
I was gonna say, so as a skin cancer survivor, I wanted to ask, tell the audience, how do you, you obviously mentioned before that, you were avoiding the sun and got skin cancer, right? So now, how is your sunlight routine now? Is my curiosity for our listeners. Like, how do you use the sun now?
I go in the sun. I go outside. I'm not afraid to be outside. It took me a few years to like let go of the whole sunglasses thing, but once that was an intuitive thing, by the way. That was like, oh,
Mm.
no, these aren't good for me. And that was before any of this knowledge that I have now. So that was an interesting, like, I'm just going to set those aside. Um, Taking my contacts out has been a big change. So I think it's less about because I've been a glasses and contacts wearer. So,
Mhm.
for example, we went to the ocean beach this summer, and I said to myself, I want to wear my contacts because I want to swim. I'm going to get sunburn. I just, like that's just going to happen. And I did. And it wasn't bad because my skin is conditioned. But, I think that's the bummer in all of this. I'm trying to find the lenses where I don't have the UVA.
The dailies, I believe, allow the UV light through.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But
Yeah.
that's been like the practice of like letting my eyes be naked in the sun has been like more of a intentional practice than just being outside. And again, like intuitively, I'll know if I've had a little too much sun, I'll just cover up or go in the shade, but not being afraid to go outside and using the calendar year, using all the seasons to be outside. I ground in the winter. I try to garden as much as I can. I try to, a few days ago when took my son to the beach, we were there for 4 hours. Nobody was there. It was like 74 degrees. I'm like, this is a beach day.
Perfect each day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I try to just, I'm not afraid of the sun. I don't, it doesn't scare me at all. And I think, I'm aging, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to lay out from 1 to 4 on a hot summer day. I probably wouldn't have done that 20 years ago either.
Mhm.
But I try to just, early morning, sunset, and the multiple times of day, I really just have that practice embedded in that routine in me now. So I don't, there are areas of my body that are not as conditioned as other areas. So, I think that if I were exposing myself more, I would want to build that up over time. But yeah, I love being outside and I've
Yeah,
been.
and I'm sure you're blocking artificial light as well, on the flip side to mitigate any of that issue, correct?
Yeah, actually, and I really use nighttime as a practice. So I have pretty strict circadian evening practices, and I think that's really helped my son's health as well. To be honest, there
Mhm.
really aren't screens after the sun goes down. I'm pretty light on screens in the household anyway. I have like colorful glasses that I keep in a bin, and I'm like, you want to wear the red? Do you want to? I mean, I try.
Make it fun. Which one? Pick a pair, any pair.
I'm like red or yellow. you know? So I try, it's like, with kids, it's just different, but I try to practice. We really power down. We just have like one soft bulb in the evening, and I use a lot of incandescent lighting. And we are early to bed sleepers, early to rise people. And that's just, I find I stay in really good physical health, just mental health. I have a lot of clarity when I sleep really well. And we don't get sick often, knock wood. If we get sick, I don't get stressed about it, but that keeps us, I think, really healthy. So that then, if we get the nighttime right, then we can do the daytime. And, again, back to intuition, like if we've been outside too much, okay, we come in and take a break or go into the shade or cover up or, that routine. But I think sticking with it and just knowing that no matter the weather, we can get outside. I try to practice that. It's not easy. My son's in public school. We have our, day to day, and it's, inside time. You do start to see it log, especially as the days get shorter and the night comes
Yeah.
sooner.
Yeah,
Um,
because you're by me, and at 4 o'clock, the kids get home from school, and it's already dark out in the winter, and that's like they're really not getting enough sunlight those days because if they go outside at recess, that's a whole conversation, but they're not getting enough sunlight on those days, unfortunately, because they're inside that building all day long, through the winter underneath in that, environment. And I have that same situation, and then we gotta just do the best that we can, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, we try. A couple of uh, just kind of blessings of this year that I'm noticing is, so I'll take my son to before care. So he goes to school at 7 in the morning, and they're taking the kids outside.
That's good.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I like went to the person in charge. I just said, thank you so much. I said, my son really looks forward to this. And I said, it's really important that children get early morning sunlight, and you are really helping them, you know, this is helping them with academic success. And so I just want to acknowledge that you're doing it. And I think it's so important. And I'm really grateful to you. And she was like, thank you so much. And I'm like, so that's a way that I can sort of like, slowly bring it into community more. But that's been so great. And he does get out of school by 2:20. And that time of day tends to be really bright and sunny. So we'll, slowly walk home or stay and play a little bit and try to just really get that outside time. But you have to carve it out and be really intentional.
Hmm.
And, it's okay. That's what I choose to stay disciplined with.
So light is one of your four pillars, right? So
Mhm.
light, emotion, thought, movement. So when you're working with a new client, for example, Robyn, like how do you discern or how do you interact with them in order to discern which one of those pillars you're going to focus on? Or is it not quite that cut and dried? Is it more of a combination?
I would say everybody's different, but I do try to really listen to the story they're telling about why they feel the way they feel. So it's usually thought and emotion patterns that are easiest to kind of talk about. Say, okay, well, this, like it sounds like you're overthinking this. Like, I feel like there's a story of why. So even like a client recently, for example, jumping on wants to talk about her son. And I say, well, I think, this is probably going on because of some kind of separation that the two of you had that wasn't natural. So the child is sort of trying to find nurturing from the other parent, but really needed it in you. And then I was able to kind of discern like, I want to know what your breastfeeding story was like and when it ended and what happened with your other son. And like,
Mhm.
and so that was like a point of resonance. And so from there, we could start more deeper conversations about like, the emotions that are being held and where the dysregulation is in the nervous system. And then I can talk about, okay, so you want supports, whether it's, to supplement strep outbreaks or that kind of thing, but let's talk about it in terms of susceptibility and we can it through the emotional lens, the overthinking lens, and then where you have the power as the mom to really bring in co-regulation. And here are some ways that we can talk about that. We could talk about that in like how you move or maybe going for walks together, co-regulating through movement and having conversation, or and then the conversation of your light life comes in. So things just weave in and out based on where people are, in their storytelling and what they want to heal through. So I
Mhm.
really need to listen and then sort of bring the conversation to where I feel like is the heart of the matter. Like you kind of bring it there
Yeah.
and then we flower from there. But that's the toggle. And I think thought and emotion is safest. Thought and emotion is easiest. Movement is a little more nuanced. But I do think it's where I can really help people understand what like why a nervous system would be dysregulated and what these patterns within like your day to day and like the mom or the dad or in the household or in the family, what are the outbursts that you're like the emotional reasons why we're talking, and then where the dysregulation is and and how to kind of heal it and shore it up from there. And
Mhm.
within that there's like behaviors, habits, choices, practices, lots of ways to kind of weave things in.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. No, beautiful. I love that. I love that you're like guiding the clients based on what their story is, right? Just like with yourself, right? Your symptoms told the story, right? What they tell you is going to tell their story. And then you weave and go based on that. Like, what do they need right now? Like, what do we need to work on? Um, let's talk a little bit about movement and how you integrate that. Like, because I know that we were speaking a little bit before with your son, you were doing a little bit of different movement techniques to support him and his health. And, I know you integrate that a little bit with clients, but let's talk about a little bit about movement and the nervous system and how that's supportive.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a yoga teacher for a long time. And so that's how I've come to understand how the body moves. I was a ballet dancer growing up. I've always been like, I've had movement in my body. I also, just quick side story, years ago ran a marathon and I ran it injured. I got injured in a training run, but I was like, I have been training for months. I'm going to run this race. And I did.
I
And I
get
had,
it.
you do, yeah. I was like, I'm going to do it. And I wasn't walking right. And I had this like interesting hobble. And what I noticed while I ran the race is that I witnessed my body rehabilitate and heal through it.
Mm.
So that was like my first real, like, again, like my own experience of understanding, like, when you're outside and you're in the sun and you're feeling good and you're an open vessel to receiving the right light, the right energy, the right vibration, and everything's aligned, you're just you healing can take place. And so I had
Mm.
that experience while running the race, and I wasn't limping after the race. I was exhausted, but I was fine. I was totally fine.
That's
And
like a miracle story.
for a long time I thought maybe it was too, but it's not. It's how amazing the body is, and how
Yeah.
when you're attuning to the frequencies of, you can attune to anything, right? You can experience and witness shift and change within you. So, I mean, it was so cool though. I got to say it was really, really cool. And then I went back. I remember going to yoga the next day and really working with my body and just not having this like psoas distress anymore. And at that time, I was like, what's a psoas? So then the yoga piece really took shape for me and understanding the body and anatomy. And that's when I really learned about the fascial system too, which is like, now there's so much talk about it, which I love, because like that's always been through yoga how I've learned, where we say in the yoga world, we say the issues are in the tissues, like, and then you can work through, these postures, and you have to breathe and move. It's breath and movement. It's breath and
Mhm.
movement. And that's where the breath and the movement and brain function, I believe, that's where coherence comes into play. So through
Mm.
a yoga practice, and that's how I've come to work with movement, is sort of, for me, a yoga practice is just really presencing yourself with the body and breath, and giving yourself like kind of an elongated time or chance to be in this space
Mm.
fully present, right? Breath and body, oneness. So embodiment. And that's where your systems can communicate. So you have these like physiological and energetic systems that need to coalesce, that need to connect and work together to kind of shore things up inside of you or work things out for you. So with clients and movement, it's a little bit like, what's your movement like life? What are your habits and choices? How do you bring movement into your body? What's kind of like with light, what's your ratio of movement to stillness time?
Mm.
But also understanding that stillness, like presencing yourself in stillness, and like a meditation practice is an active state in the body, as opposed to like a vegetative stillness, which is that, like, crashing on the couch, sustaining
Yes.
whatever like frustration or emotion you're like trying to numb yourself from. So just, I think, differentiating that and understanding movement in that way.
Mhm.
But I think also with neuroscience and neuroplasticity and even like bioplasticity, this understanding of like, well, the brain needs the body and the body needs the brain. And when you're in movement, the fascial network and all these other energetic and even anatomical networks, that's when things can really rewire and change and shift. And so that understanding is how I bring movement into my work. And, I was able to support my son in through this light when we went through some of our difficulties, because I was noticing that he was really struggling with interoceptive cueing. So that would be like not recognizing hunger cues, not
Mm.
recognizing or suppressing or controlling bowel cues. Um, and so hygiene and like sensory issues were creeping up, like suddenly not wanting to brush his teeth, when like I was like, well, this isn't, but it wasn't like a behavioral thing. It was like suddenly it's like, I don't want this movement in my mouth. So there were all of these, people would describe them as sensory or behavioral or compulsory things. And there are all these like words under maybe a neurodivergent umbrella, but
Mhm.
I saw it through the nervous system, right? Where's our sense of safety expressed or suppressed? Well, through the lens of our nervous system. And that's where the brain body connection is really supported in my experience and from how I see things. Um,
Mm.
and divinity and light can express or or not through us, right? Ease, dis-ease, all of that. But the nervous system will really show you kind of like symptoms where you're not being like, you're not a clean, attuned vessel, right? So you don't have the anatomical alignment. So that can be something, just quick sidebar, like forward head posture. You're going to have nervous system distress because you're not attuned to neutrality. Neutrality is where you can connect to divinity, mother, and the earth, right? So an aligned spine, that's why chiropractic care can be so important, or at least if, whether or not you want to go to a chiropractor, I think understanding how a chiropractor understands the nervous system is because of the brain body connection, the spine and the brain, it's like the tree of life. So with my son, I started to say, okay, we have, and then there's like the proprioceptive piece too with him, where it's like, oh, okay, he's jumping on top of me. He wants to jump. He's got to push. So we have to lift heavy things. We need to do wheelbarrows. So he's in a phase of that right now. But we really just did gentle movements, crossing the midline. We were crawling. I was rocking him on my body. We would do these rock and rolls, but everything was gentle. Nothing was like frantic or like quick or jolted. It was very like, so he needs co-regulation, right? He was really relying on me for safety, and managing two nervous systems can be a little overwhelming, right? So I'd like to have my own, and I would like him to have his own. And like anybody in any kind of relationship dynamic, friend, spouse, parent, right? You really want to have your own sovereign nervous system, and you really can only support somebody else if yours is intact and somebody isn't taking from you. So teaching him to understand what safety is and what that cueing, so bringing that cueing back into his body took a lot of those gentle movements. And so bringing yoga and tabletop and the movements of the spine, threading needles, rocking, we would do like rocking back and forth, and then coming to stand, so building just through the just movements of control within the body. Like, can you cross your ankles and sit down and rock and then come back up to stand? So like presencing yourself, but also like using the muscles and the motors, and then being busy enough in that moment to not think about anything else, but just like get back up to stand. Trust falls. We did a lot with, I was then able to assess like, okay, first of all, he was looking forward to the time we spent together. So I thought that was like so sweet. And I thought, really, I think I'm onto something. And that's when I started to learn more about primitive reflex integration. And I thought, oh, okay, like I think maybe there's some disconnect here. And so as I was able to just do more gentle movements and rocking and rhythmic and co-regulating with him through the movements, I noticed some changes in his brain function.
Nice.
Improvements in reading. I think we still have some places to go with that, but things are really improving academically for him.
Yeah. Always important to notice those small wins, though. Like, it's so important. So I'm so proud of you for doing that. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fun. I have a couple of other moms who have wanted me to work with their kids too. And, I do a lot with the eye movements, just a lot with alignment and checking on like hip, what your stance is. Like, how do you stand in your body where your feet are grounded, time barefoot? Working with other kids, I've been able to see too, like, oh, maybe there's some integration here that would support, but I try to use the yoga to inform the movement, because that's where my that's where my area of expertise is. But I think there's something to be said about reflex integration and nervous system dysfunction, or the practice of, here's how I would like to say it, the practice of teaching or demonstrating for somebody else, and probably adults too, what does safety feel like in my body? What do my behaviors, what does my voice sound like, even intonation, word choice, thought patterns, movement patterns, habits, choices when I'm in a dysregulated state or when I'm not feeling safe. And I think that, if you wanted to really boil trauma down, at any stage or age in life where we feel out of control or we're not able to notice, right, or we're numb to our behavior patterns, our habits, and our choices, I would look there to inform, where we're not approaching or looking carefully at what needs to be looked at or worked through. And that would, I think, correlate to emotions that have been suppressed,
Hmm.
subconscious and unconscious stories that maybe need to be unearthed and loved and reintegrated. And I think that there's a lot that can be done there with movement and brain function. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we're at the beginning of that understanding.
Yeah, the mind and body are ever so connected, and the suppressed emotions get stored in our exclusion zone water, and all that trauma is we're storing all of that, and we don't even realize it. But then you can do some of these movements, or it could be yoga too. It doesn't have to be just the primitive movements, it can be all different kinds of things, and you can have a release or have things happen. Heather just introduced me to myofascial release, which I noticed like I had this weird foot pain for like a few days after, and then I had this weird pain in my elbow and down to my fingers. I'm like, to me, that's emotional stuff moving out of the body, especially when it comes out of the extremities. Always. That's my always first reaction. As a homeopath, we always look for things to move out of the extremities. And I do. I think that's stored emotional trauma. Not that I have to analyze it or know what trauma left my body. That doesn't really matter. The point is it's moving through. And yoga, I mean, honestly, I've always loved yoga. I've always actually had a desire to become a yoga teacher too. So I think that's cool because you feel so, I don't know, when I feel the same thing when I run to an exercise. So exercise for me is a very good regulatory process, but I feel so just, I don't know, so in my body when I'm doing yoga, like the way you described. So it's beautiful. So, and I'm so glad to hear your son has had some really great improvements. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really proud of him. And I think it's just informed, my work, but also it's nice that, when he wants to spend time together, it's usually like a really healthy choice. And it's reading, it's the exercises, it's the going for a walk, and so I
Mm.
feel just like so excited about the person he's becoming. And I can't change his journey. I can't, go back and change time, but I feel like, how we presence ourselves together and also creating safety and peace in the household and just, with circadian practices and how we presence ourselves, then it's like, okay, well, he's going to learn discernment and he'll take that out to the streets and then he'll recognize this toggle between this is safety or this is not, and that's an important practice, and so we can only just do the best we can with what we have, but I think it's exciting to see how he's growing up, and I don't know, it's exciting to be on the other side of some really hard years and to know that, like, I'm still faced with challenges, but I feel like this, I don't know, it's exciting to see how people are interested in these conversations, and that just gives me like a lot of hope and makes me feel like so excited for the future, because sometimes it's lonely when you think about this stuff all day long and you don't know who to talk to about it.
We have our
Yeah.
community, develop our community and have
Yes.
ways to support each other. And it's happening, but there's like little segments, and then hopefully we can all coalesce at some point.
Hmm.
So, what does a day in the life of Robyn look like now? Like, how are you tending to yourself
Hmm.
now? What are the things you do to keep yourself aligned and embodied? Tell us what's going on for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably pretty boring, but I'm okay with that. And I really try to find as much quiet as I can. So having really still, dark or quiet nights is something I really like to practice. So that on the days like if it's a late baseball game or there's something going on, okay, we'll do that, and then I've got 5 days of quiet to balance it out. I get up early. It's still dark out when I get up in the morning. I try to catch the sunrise in some way. So we're kind of entering into the maybe out the window season, just kind of curling up and catching it as much as I can. I try to walk after I drop my son off on those school days in that early morning time. I'll try to take my early morning walk, get the sun in the eyes, maybe listen to some music or not. I try not to put things in my ears too, like because I feel like listening is good, but I'd like to listen to the birds and
Hmm.
attune to nature. Um, I try to be intentional with when I eat and how I eat and what I eat. But I think it's important to say too, I try to laugh and not worry. Like sometimes I just want to have a bowl of ice cream, and I try to model that with my son too. Like, okay, let's go have a bowl of ice cream. Like, because
Yeah.
like that's important too. And I think historically, I've gone through phases where I've been really rigid, regimented in more of a rigid way. So just taking things, more easily. Um, and just more trust and catching my thoughts too. If I'm going back to old patterns of thinking, just kind of catching myself, telling myself nicer things and being kinder to myself, and noticing those
Mm.
moments too, the little moments. But I just am balancing a work schedule and growing this work and being a mom, and all that comes along with that. I feel like, my life is full, and I look forward to it filling up in more ways in the days to come. But right now, this is what it is.
I hear so much balance in you, like that, like hard, the hard and the softness, the day and the night, the light and the dark, the movement and the rest, like it's all balance, that you're trying to put there and really give yourself that. And it's really beautiful. So I think you're doing an awesome job.
Oh, thanks, Vanessa. When I hear you say it back, it sounds so wonderful. So thank you. Yeah, because it's
You're doing it though. Yeah, you're doing it.
yeah. So I guess that is it, right? Being with the yin and the yang.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of health and healing is that you need both. You need the light, you need the dark, you need it all, right? You need all the things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, beautiful. So, what are your goals, aspirations for the future?
Great question. Building more community, I think finding, really thinking intentionally about like where I want to live and how I want to live. What my cooking practices will be, what my gardening practices will be, how to
Mm,
continue to integrate into the modern world, but create a life that I feel really comfortable living in. Um,
mm,
I feel I think because I'm a mom, I see what the children are exposed to with light, and I feel like that feels like really important to find a way to talk to create a new perspective on that for the health of our children, especially around not a native EMF and artificial light environments. So I feel kind of called to push myself there, um, which is a little scary right now because speaking up
mhm.
that way in a community that doesn't live that way, but and I think I think practicing too, being brave enough to say no as a parent to things that, I don't think are good to
Mhm.
have, but no, and knowing like that might not be okay with my son, but finding that balance through all the parenting that's to come. And then just growing the work. So, talking to more people, and I'd love to have a space. I want to build community. And I think also just more healing modalities, more quantum healing for people, and whatever that looks like. So building bridges with other people, building connections, but also just staying true to what it is now and trusting that that's okay. And like, I feel really grateful that people are more interested and that I can say, let's meet here, and I can practice what I preach, and I can work with people outside, and we go for walks
Mm.
at the water, and we go, like I just try to really do all of this work outside as much as I can and stay true to it. So it's like, yeah, like the yin and the yang, like thinking about the future and also living in the moment, and like
Mhm.
and that practice. And it is still up and down. I am in a phase where I'm a single parent. So there's, saying yes is not always easy in whatever my next steps are. So I think just being really patient, and trusting that if I've made it this far, that I could, that I'm
Mm.
excited about what's to come. So.
Oh my gosh, it's all so yummy. I love
Oh,
it. It's been a real privilege to have you on the show today, Robyn, and let our listeners know where they can find you, how, if they want to, take advantage of your services, where can they find you?
sure. Well, my website is mywayom.com. That's my business name, mywayom. So mywayom.com. And you can email me if you want to. I'm kind of old school, I guess. Robyn at mywayom.com. It's Robyn with a Y, but there's a place on the website to connect with me or send me a note or an email, and you can see all my services there. And yeah. So, and I have an Instagram account that I just don't really know how to use. So I try the best I can, but you're welcome to follow me on Instagram.
I love it. I love how authentic you are. Yeah, when it feels right, it'll feel right. And I love how much that you're trying to do within the local community. I think that's really, really beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's that expression? Think globally, act locally. I feel like
Mm.
that's important to me. And, I can speak about it in big ways and in community like this and use platforms, and that's exciting. But I live here. And if I can create an impact or make an impact here, it's going to service my community and me in like a nice symbiotic way. And so that feels
Mhm.
like a really great way to,
It feels aligned. Yeah.
yeah, it feels aligned. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
So.
well, it was a pleasure to have you on the show today, Robyn. We had a lot of fun chatting with you, and I loved everything you shared today. You were just a beautiful soul. So I'm happy to know you. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And yeah, thanks for joining in on the quantum. My goodness, on the Quantum Health Connection podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, to both of you, Heather and Vanessa. I just loved being here with you today. So thank
Yeah.
you.